Tonight, another special Greater Boston, the second in our series of the only televised primary debates in Massachusetts. While there's only one Democrat still campaigning for governor ahead of the September 6th primary, that of course would be Attorney General Maura Healey, there are plenty of competition in the race for the number 2 spot. And in this state, lieutenant governors have only 2 constitutional responsibilities: to serve as a member of the Governor's Council, which votes on judicial nominations, pardons, commutations, and of course to step in if and when the governor is unable to serve. I'm joined by the 3 Democrats vying for the job this time around. Kim Driscoll is the first woman elected mayor of Salem. She's run the city since 2006. Eric Lesser was elected to the state Senate in 2014, represents a large swath of Western Mass, including Amherst and Northampton. Previously served as Director of Strategic Planning for the White House Council of Economic Advisors, Special Assistant to Obama Senior Advisor David Axelrod. Tami Gouveia was a social worker for 25 years before being elected to the state's House of Representatives in 2018, representing Acton, Chelmsford, Concord, and Carlisle. As always, the rules, there are none. But time is short, so brevity is appreciated, actually required. Feel free to talk to each other, just not over each other. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Welcome, and I really appreciate all 3 of you being there. Starting with you, Mayor, if I can. Yeah. We'll talk in a minute about what you do as Lieutenant Governor. Let's start with why you want a job with virtually no specific functions other than chairing this obscure body. What's the attraction?
You know, for me, being a mayor for the last 16 years, I think it's really important that we have that kind of experience in the State House. As someone on the ground every day, championing the work of local government, I think the branch of government you rely on the most. Educating your kids, keeping your neighborhood safe, investing in those places you make memories. I know the work that I do on the ground, and so many other local leaders, depends on having a strong connection to the state, both resources, technical assistance, know-how. I want to make sure our communities are working and thriving. When we have thriving communities, we have a thriving Commonwealth. I think I have some skills and experience to bring to bear for my work in Chelsea and in Salem, and I wanted to put it to good.
The governor decides if you even have that function. That function is not laid out in the Constitution or anywhere else.
But the last two administrations, you've seen the lieutenant governor play a major role, both Polito and Lieutenant Governor Murray. I think this is a microcosm of the challenges we face at the state level dealing with cities, and I think that experience really matters.
Senator, what's the attraction to you?
Well, Jim, thanks for having me. Quick correction on the intro. I actually represent Springfield and Chicopee.
Oh, my apologies.
A neighbor of mine, Joe Comerford, represents Amherst, Northampton.
My sincere apologies.
We're a big family in Western Mass. So, but Jim, the question voters are going to be asking is who is the right lieutenant for Maura Healey? Who's going to be the right partner for Maura Healey? Who's going to be the right person to implement her agenda? Because you're exactly right, Jim. It's going to be Maura as governor that sets the agenda. I think the skills and the experience...
I didn't say she'd be governor. I said she's the only Democrat.
We want her to be governor. But the skills and experience I bring to the table are going to help implement her agenda, I think, the best way. The perspective of someone from Western Mass, the perspective of someone with high-level Senate experience, the perspective of someone with high-level federal experience is going to help make her agenda implemented throughout the state and represent all regions of the state.
But Senator, when you declared, she hadn't even declared her candidacy, so you had no idea who you'd be serving with should it be Lieutenant Governor.
Well, it's our common democratic values, the Democratic nominee. Now, of course, we know that that nominee will be Governor Healey. She's running unopposed. Okay. I have the receipts, Jim, of having worked with Maura substantively on a lot of issues, including a bulk purchasing program for Narcan and a student loan borrower bill of rights that we did together that is helping 800,000 student loan borrowers across Massachusetts as we speak.
Representative, what's the attraction of the job to you?
Yeah, well, again, I want to say thank you for
having us. I got your district wrong, too?
No, you didn't. I just want to say thank you, and thank you to both Kim and Eric for being here for our first official debate. I appreciate it. So I got into this race over a year ago, and the reason why I jumped into the race is I believe that our state is as great as we are and as well-resourced as we are still leaving far too many people behind. So I see tremendous opportunity in the lieutenant governor's position based on my skill set as a social worker for 25 years, a state representative, and a doctor of public health, to get in from day one, to roll up my sleeves and start to address the big complex issues that we're facing and that I've been hearing about as I've crisscrossed the state for 13 months.
Can we go quickly through this? You mentioned Maura Healey, Senator. Let's assume there's a major disagreement between you and the person you essentially report to. For example, you're all for single payer. Am I not right about that? And Maura Healey, that's not at the top of her list about how to make health care affordable. She says to you, go out and sell a different plan on healthcare, and you don't think that's the best plan. What do you do?
Jim, that's an easy question. The job is to support the governor. You're the lieutenant to the governor, unless it's an issue of high moral consequence.
Is that not an issue of high moral?
Well, I think all of us share the goal of expanding and improving healthcare access. The question is how you get there. So absolutely, my job is to implement what the governor needs. And by the way, Jim, I've done that. Working for President Obama, you work as a team around an executive team, and you help implement that vision that's set by the top executive.
Do you have any problem just whatever the governor says to do?
I want to pick up on that thread, actually, of teams. So my experience with teams and what I think is critical on teams is embracing the notion of conflict and disagreement. That is how you get to the best policy solutions to address the root causes of what's driving these big issues. We know that people continue to be saddled with healthcare-related debt, still claiming bankruptcy, really challenged, just picking up on this issue around single payer. And we're all running as lieutenant governor candidates. We'll have a mandate from the folks who also voted us to be able to give voice to the issues that we've been running on.
But if the mandate from your boss is not what you want to do, you'll do it?
But I think we'll have the ear. The point is we'll have the ear of the governor to really advocate for some of those things that we've been hearing about also on the campaign trail and that I've been hearing about for the last 13 months.
Mayor, any problem doing something the governor tells you to do, even if you're not crazy about it?
You know, my take is we've got an attorney general who's surrounded herself with people. She doesn't want a bunch of yes people. She wants folks who are going to work together, but also understand where we push and pull. And you work as a team. I'm a mayor right now. I have a senior staff I work with every day. We don't always agree on every issue. We tussle it out. We have the discussions. We make the best interest for our community, and then we move forward with everybody working together. And I think that's what you expect out of government.
Representative, one of the specific functions, as I mentioned, is this governor's council. It's a body that virtually nobody in Massachusetts knows exists. Yeah. Most people have no idea who's on the governor's council. Are you concerned that it has the power it has to confirm judges, make decisions on pardons and commutations? Does that trouble you?
I'm not concerned about the power that it has, but I do think it's on us, and part of the role that I want to play on that as the chair of the governor's council is to make sure that there's transparency, that we're continuing to air it, the hearings on YouTube, and making sure that the judges that we're appointing, the folks that get appointed to the parole board, really reflect the diversity in our state, both regionally, expertise, and making sure that those lifetime appointments, that people really understand the role of childhood trauma, that they understand the role of systemic racism and intergenerational poverty, with folks getting involved in the criminal legal system. That's also something that I think reflects the values of voters right here in Massachusetts.
Don't you think it's a problem, Mayor, that the body, again, that confirms judges in the state is a body, and I think you all nodded in agreement, that I would say the vast majority of viewers and voters don't even know exist, much less who represents them. Is that a problem?
Yeah, we often refer to it as the most important state commission you never heard of. And I think as Lieutenant Governor, I hope to be in a position to not only chair that group, but bring openness and transparency. You know, anyone who's chaired a local government meeting, I just came over 2 years of chairing a Salem school committee during a pandemic. How do we have constructive dialogue? How do we make sure it's open and transparent? How do we bring to bear the responsibilities of that particular organization, which is, in my estimation, given what we're seeing in the Supreme Court, vitally important to what's happening in our communities. I know how to take care of working in a body where you don't always agree, but you need to be able to have constructive dialogue. Why aren't these meetings on Zoom? How do we make sure it's opening in a very open and transparent way, following the open meeting law?
Are you concerned about the obscurity issue?
Well, it might be an obscure body, but it plays a very important role in the lives of people of the Commonwealth. For people who are following along tonight who might not be familiar, the Governor's Council confirms all judges nominated by the governor, as well as all pardons and commutations. They shape how people engage with the criminal justice system. They shape how laws are implemented in our state. And Jim, I think I'm uniquely suited to reinvigorate that body. I'm an attorney. I'm the vice chair of our Judiciary Committee in the Senate. I worked on 2 Supreme Court nominations when I worked for President Obama, for Elena Kagan and for Sonia Sotomayor. We need more diversity on our bench in Massachusetts, and we need to work to recruit and help very good, talented candidates make it through that gauntlet of the Governor's Council, because it is a gauntlet.
Okay, so there are 8 members. Don't worry, I'm not going to embarrass you. But could you name all 8? Could you?
Oh, I certainly could, yeah.
Could you?
Probably not, but one of the
Could
key
you?
ones.
I can name most of them, but probably not all.
Did you ever even go to a governor's
I've
council
watched
meeting?
them on
Yeah,
Zoom because they've been,
No,
not-
before you declared.
No,
Did you
not
ever go
before
to
I
one?
declared.
Did you ever go to one?
No, yeah.
Did you ever go to one?
I was there to support a candidate.
Is that not a problem?
Yeah.
This is your primary constitutional function,
Well,
and
But here's
I think
the
neither of you
here's
have been there, and
No.
you were only there once?
I think
Here's
we'd
the
all-
really important thing that we need to recognize. I, too, am a lawyer and know how important this body is and how important it is for us to celebrate it. Like, we actually stand out. I just came back from Georgia, a trip there, where they elect judges. Like, we do things differently here. We have a judicial nominating committee.
Yeah.
We have this backstop process with governor's counselors. We're doing things right. We need to make sure it's open, transparent, that we're recruiting people, and that we have some ground rules, and
Gotta
even
hold
how
it.
governor's counselors work amongst themselves.
What's the major thing that sets you apart from the other two? Why you, why not them?
Well, first, we have great candidates, and we've gotten to know each other pretty well over the course of a long campaign. But just a couple of things, Jim. I'm the only person from outside 495. I come from a really vibrant, really diverse area in Greater Springfield. I think if you've seen in recent years, whether it was the partnership between Karen Polito and Charlie Baker, or Tim Murray and Deval Patrick, that it's important to have a team that really reflects and can speak to the entire state. I'm also the only candidate that's had federal experience at a time when we know interplay with the federal government is going to be key. I'm also the only candidate, Jim, that's been in the rooms for those high-stakes negotiations at the State House. We were there overnight into Monday morning. I've done 3 economic development bills that have helped fund MassWorks, have helped fund broadband access across the state, have helped fund job training and voc-ed programs. And I think I'll be the right partner for
Anything
Maura
wrong
Healey.
with those two? You talk about what's right with you. Anything wrong with the other two candidates?
I'm focused on my
Fine.
positive vision and my proactive
How about you?
view.
What sets you apart?
Yeah, the fact that I've been, as I already said, a public health social worker for the last 25 years. I have a doctorate in public health, really being able to focus on the big issues that impact our health, our well-being, and our dignity every single day. I've also lived a lot of the financial struggles that so many families are facing now, that far too many of our families of color have been facing for years and years. Bringing that voice, bringing that perspective, bringing collaborative leadership. You know, I have been the executive founder of several organizations, getting at the root causes of major, major issues that we're facing, including around opioids and environmental justice issues. So
Any
really
problem
being a
with
voice
those
to
two?
that. You know, I'm not here, again, I'm also
That's
here
fine.
just to like focus on who I am, you know, given the relative obscurity even of the lieutenant governor's
Yeah.
race and what it does, it's really just been important
Okay.
for me to get that message out.
Mayor, how about you?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference for me in terms of the work that I've done. This is an executive role. You're going to be partnering with the governor to implement projects and programs. I've been a mayor for the last 16 years. I worked in the city of Chelsea as they came out of receivership. I've had to actually do the work on the ground. It's different to talk about things as a policy leader, to rail against or criticize what might be happening when you actually have to do the work on the ground. So that's leading on housing, leading on transportation. We've implemented those projects and programs. I know how hard it is to actually get stuff done, and that's a big difference from an executive perspective than someone who can lead on a policy front. You've got to solve problems every day for people when you're mayor. It's a little different than when you're in the legislature. No, believe me, no slight important role, but very different when you have to do, not just talk about things.
Senator,
I would challenge that premise because we've done quite a lot that has had real impact on people's lives on a daily basis at a massive scale, not isolated to one community or one place. Maura Healey and I worked together to take on Betsy DeVos and write a new student loan borrower Bill of Rights, a new Chapter 93A protection that got implemented last year. Her office is implementing it and enforcing it. 800,000 people have been benefiting from every corner of our state from that law. People write to me routinely that have been directly impacted, who have had their costs go down on their annual bills because of that law. So
Representative,
you can make a big impact, and you have to keep an eye on that on a statewide
You wanted to
level.
respond to the mayor, too.
I think, yes, I do. I think given the complexity of the issues that we're facing, from housing and climate change to mental health and childcare, we're still in the middle of COVID. We need someone in that corner office who's partnering with Attorney General Maura Healey when she is the next governor to get to the root causes of those issues, to have an expanded view of what executive leadership really looks like. Because it's not just about being the person at the front of the room or the ultimate decision maker. It's also about some of the work that I have also led on and gotten done, even though I was told there's no way we're going to address buildings as a source of greenhouse gas emissions. By working collaboratively across the state, we got that legislation passed. That's going to have a huge impact on our goals.
let me pick up on 2 issues you both mentioned as legislators, starting with you, Representative Senator. You talked about child care. There was a measure in an economic development bill that never got resolved that would have provided tax relief to parents, not to mention others.
Yeah.
And there's an you mentioned economic development. That whole bill of $4 billion was supposed to have rebates for moderate income people, saying they needed it. None of that happened because your leadership decided you should go home on a 5-month vacation.
Absolutely.
Are you okay with that?
I'm not okay with that. I think
Did you speak out against it?
I did. And I think that we should get back into a special session so that we can get that tax relief out to folks across the Commonwealth, addressing issues for renters, alleviating the pressures given the high rise in rental costs, also alleviating pressures on our seniors. And of course, also, as you've already pointed out, people with dependents. So we got to get back to the table, get back into session at some point that over the course of the next 5 months to get that done for the
Senator,
hardworking
you troubled that
families
you're on a
here.
5-month vacation?
I'm certainly not on a 5-month vacation, Jim, but let me just
Well, you're not
address,
meeting. You're
let me
paid
just
to-
address the question about childcare, and I will address the question about economic development. So look, I'm a parent of 3 young kids. My wife and I both work long hours. I've got a 9-year-old, an almost 6-year-old, and a 16-month-old, and our child care bill is more than our mortgage, and that's not unusual in our state. We are in a crisis around child care. As for the economic development bill, it was frankly a bad thing that it did not pass, but it's going to get resolved. I called immediately for us to figure it out, to come back, to do what we have to do. I said that at the State House when I was asked. But let's also focus on what did get accomplished over the last couple of days at the State House. A landmark environmental bill that's going to reshape the economy in our state and lead to net zero. A landmark patch of the Bruin decision for guns, which we also got done. We also last week did a shield law for abortion providers in the wake of the Dobbs decision. So a lot got done. There was a curveball given in the last few days where we learned new information about those $3 billion
I want to talk about the curveball in a second. Let's leave it there for a second.
We have to come back to
You
get
troubled
that
about the
done.
legislature being out of session for 5 months? You'd have to work with them if you were
I
lieutenant
think
governor.
Absolutely, and I think this goes back to your last question, what's the difference? As a mayor on the ground, we've expanded pre-K. We've had to work to solve problems. I've had to adopt budgets, respond to COVID response and recovery, manage the city through a recession. When it comes to things like childcare, I also take the viewpoint of not only representing my constituents, people on the ground who I know. I was a mom of 3 under the age of 5. Childcare is expensive. That's why we expanded it in my community. We need more of that happening, and you need that strong relationship with the state legislature to make that happen. But let's be clear, there is a sense of urgency. People are hurting. They want housing is high, childcare costs are high, utilities and food costs, everything I'm buying at Market Basket is going up every single week. We need action. I hope the legislature does come back into session. Let's make sure the bills that were so important to community members in gateway cities, in cities and towns, small business owners, there was housing dollars in there, small business resources.
$270 million in housing dollars.
We have got to attack this
Can you
problem now.
hold it there? So I want to talk about this curveball that the senator mentioned a minute ago. This tax cap passed in 1986. According to the governor, $3 billion would be required by law to return to the taxpayer. So not only were there $700 million in tax cuts not done, not only was the $250 rebate not done, the Speaker of the House, the Speaker of your House, is saying maybe we'll repeal the thing quickly. If there was a vote in the legislature to repeal the law that mandates that somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 billion be returned to the taxpayers, how would you vote?
Well, given that law, we would need to return the dollars back to the tax.
You wouldn't vote to repeal it?
I would not at this moment vote to repeal it because we haven't even had a bill or a discussion on it in any meaningful way. But what I think we need to do is make sure that as we're returning funds back through like economic development, there's other economic development legislation that we can pass, such as wage theft. If we pass the wage theft bill, that would put $1 billion back into the pockets of hardworking people right here in our state who had their wages stolen from them. $1 billion is lost every single year in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, impacting our tax base, impacting our GDP. So there are other ways to address this issue without blunt force of repealing a law, with only several months left. Would you
vote to repeal the tax cap?
To be crystal clear, Jim, it's the law. You can't repeal
it. You can repeal it.
But what we need to do is have a process. If we want to re-examine that law for the future, that's a different conversation. But the law is the law.
You wouldn't stand in the way of the $3 billion being returned to the taxpayer?
Absolutely not. Now, you need to account for it. And that's part of the reason why there's been a delay. This is a big issue. There's $3 billion that was unaccounted for that now needs to be accounted for, which is why it's important for everyone to take a step back, see how it fits in with the overall state's picture, and fashion a response. But you do have to respect the fact that there is a law in the books that requires
passed by the
this.
voters.
Exactly.
Would you want the legislature to repeal that $3 billion and spend it on something else?
Absolutely not. We live in a land of laws.
Okay.
We've got to follow them.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of other issues that concern people. The governor was on a radio show the day the woman had to jump into the Mystic because the train was on fire. I characterized the T as a total mess. He rejected that. How would you describe the T, and what's the fix? Specifics, not rhetoric.
Yeah, a total mess is how I would describe it as well. And not just the T. Frankly, we have public transit needs throughout this Commonwealth. I know that's been the focus. That gets all the headlines. Salem has the busiest commuter rail stop in the MBTA system, really helpful to our community. I support opportunities to expand transit. We know we have east-west or west-east rail. That's also a priority. But I've also worked to input additional transportation options in my community. In Salem, we have a public ride share, on-demand shuttle. We have a city-owned ferry. We have a car share program with municipal vehicles positioned all around our community, along with ride share. We have to solve transportation woes, electrify lines to make sure they're more accessible to communities and also better for our climate, but also look to take advantage of innovation. We have an inspiration gap when it comes to transportation. We can be better than that, not just in the greater Boston area, but frankly throughout Massachusetts.
Let's describe the state of the T, Senator, and what you would do to fix it.
Jim, that answer didn't really get into specifics of the MBTA system, so let me just give you some specific recommendations. First, I'm on the Transportation Committee. We had an oversight hearing where the head of the MBTA and the Secretary of Transportation were in front of us over the derailments that have happened across the system. We asked them point blank, is the system safe? Can riders rely on the safety of the T? They looked us in the eye and they said yes. 2 days later, a woman was jumping off a bridge into the Mystic River because the Orange Line was on fire. Here's a couple things we need to do. We need to streamline the management practices. We need to require more transparency. We included legislation in a transportation bill that is now on the governor's desk to require audits and reporting to the Inspector General's office. And we need to make sure that there is a culture of safety at the T. This isn't a money issue. The legislature has written every check to Governor Baker that he's asked for. This is a culture and management issue, and we need to get in the weeds and streamline the reporting structure and have real consequences when there isn't transparency.
Very quickly, do you agree it's not a money issue before you give me your broader response?
I think it is a money issue. I think it's a combination. I think there has been mismanagement. I think we haven't made the major investments that we've needed to. My characterization of the T is it is literally crashing and burning almost every single week. It's not always safe. It's not always reliable for sure. If we make the investments that is required to make it reliable, to make it accessible for every person in our state, not just the T, but transportation writ large, it's why I support the Fair Share Amendment, making sure that we have the dollars coming in. That's why I want a fair tax system.
Tax for people
it's
who
a millionaire's
don't know the term,
tax, making sure that we are bringing in investment dollars, revenue dollars, and supporting not only transportation, which is necessary to ensure a strong economy, but also investing in education with that millionaire's tax. And that is why I have the endorsement of the Mass Teachers Association and the American Federation of Teachers as well at this
Mayor,
race.
do you agree with the senator? It's not a money issue, the T?
Oh, I definitely think we need more investment in the T, wholeheartedly. We know there are challenges to have sustainable revenue. There's capital costs, there's operating costs. We need to invest in people. I want to make sure, we've had oversight hearings, we've had blue ribbon commissions. None of that has changed the fact that somebody gets on a train and it catches on fire, or they're jumping out of a window off the commuter rail. That takes management, that takes experience, that means having leadership that's sustainable, that's going to be there, coupled with investment. It's not just money, it's also about having the right people leading organizations.
10 seconds, because I've given you more time. Not your fault, mine.
That's exactly why it's a management and personnel issue. Look, Jim, Ray LaHood was commissioned to do an investigation of the T 3 years ago. They gave very specific recommendations. Almost none of them were implemented. That's a management issue.
I want to go in this direction. GBH has done a lot of reporting on the pathetic state of minority contracting here. The most recent report by my colleagues at GBH said of state contracts, there's been a huge jump from a pitiful 2% to a pitiful 3% in terms of the share that goes to companies owned by people of color. Quickly, if you can, in 30 seconds, what would you do about that, if anything?
Well, we need to get with the business owners who are of color in our state, have conversations about what are the barriers that they're experiencing every single day to make sure that they are aware that these contracts are even available. A lot of times it's about a communication issue. We're not doing enough in state government to let people know of the resources that are available, and making sure that we're also investing in technical assistance and support on the ground every single day so that we can get more of the contracts going out to minority and women-owned businesses.
Senator.
Appreciate the question, Jim. It's something I filed legislation on and have fought for in the Economic Development Committee. Just a couple things. We need to put requirements in. And real expectations that the procurement is going to be done in a diverse way. And it has to include the high-paying procurement as well, the law firms, the investment banks, the investment houses that manage pension assets. We've got to expect diversity and transparency around who is managing what across government. And that also includes boards and commissions, which are a very important way policy is made, including boards in the private sector and, of course, boards and commissions in the state.
In addition to your answer, Mayor, since you're an executive, how have you done in terms of minority contracting in your city?
Yeah, I think we've tried to be really intentional about supporting those efforts, and that includes looking at the Massport model. We're leading a cohort of local communities to think about how we can incorporate that. The procurement laws currently can be a barrier to that, not intentional, but older laws. We formed a race equity task force to really track what we're doing. You can't measure it, then you can't understand where you're going and what your goals should be moving forward. There's a lot more we can do at the state level, I think, to make sure we're doing that outreach, that training, and most importantly, breaking down those barriers. We're a major contractor. Cities, government, let's make sure we're thinking about the growth of our Black and brown community leaders and business leaders when we're buying and procuring goods and services.
Okay, last question. You each have about 30 seconds. I'll start with you, Representative. There have been 72 lieutenant governors. I'm sure you can recite them all.
Oh, yeah.
Who among them would you say is the model for how you serve as lieutenant governor, and what was his or her greatest accomplishment? Not after they left the job, but when they were doing the job. 30 seconds.
Evelyn Murphy, for sure. I have had ongoing conversations with her throughout this race, really admire the work that she did, and part of it was bringing to forward the work with municipalities, but in this race and where we are right now with the complexity of issues, we need someone who can get to work on day one, addressing and investing in our people to support our municipal leaders. I don't see it as an either or, I see it as a both and.
Very quickly, though, when Mike Dukakis, her governor, went out of town, she proposed the solution to the state budget without his stamp. Is that?
Well, I wouldn't go that route. That
Okay,
is not
fine.
As a social worker, that's not my style.
Who would be your role model, and what is their greatest accomplishment, Senator?
Rep. Gouveia has a great one with Evelyn Murphy that was definitely on my list. Another recent one I would name is Tim Murray, specifically the work he did to connect Worcester and Boston by rail service. Central Mass has been transformed by that investment. Now we need to pull that west to Springfield and Pittsfield.
How about you, Mayor?
Yeah, I'd advocate for both Evelyn Murphy and Tim Murray. Tim, as a former mayor, I think understood the needs of communities on the ground, how to do what he'd call the blocking and tackling of government, and why it was so critical to have somebody with that mayoral experience, in this position. So sometimes you need the state government to get out of the way. Sometimes you need resources. Sometimes it's technical assistance. We have all these gateway cities with amazing opportunities and people. Let's make sure we're connecting this Commonwealth in a way that's going to ensure we're seeing economic prosperity beyond the Kendall Square and the Seaport District. That's what a mayor does every day. You're a champion for your hometown. I want to take my experience and be a champion for all our hometowns.
Very quickly, Tim Murray left early. He left Patrick without a lieutenant governor.
Did.
You'd pledge to serve your whole term?
Oh, absolutely.
And you?
Absolutely, yes.
And you?
Definitely.
Okay, you don't have to raise your right hands. It's a pleasure to see all three of you. I wish you a lot of luck, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Kim Driscoll, Eric Lesser, Tami Gouveia. That's it for tonight. U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins will join me tomorrow, and our primary debate series will continue next week with the Democratic candidates for state auditor. That's on Monday. Then the Democratic candidates for Secretary of State. That is next Wednesday. The Boston Globe, WCVB, and WBUR are also holding a series of primary radio debates starting tomorrow. We hope you'll listen to them all. Once again, primary election day is Tuesday, September 6th. Please vote, and for now, thank you for watching. Good night.